In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the current conditions where there is a few interesting things going on, and then we're going to take a longer range look than we've been seeing over the past few days. Instead of taking a look at our normal 10-day forecast period, we're probably going to take a look at more like 15 plus days. We'll take a look at a long range model at the end as well to get a good grasp on how November is going to go, because it is November 1st. And a little bit into December as well. So we're going to take a very long range look actually. As we can see, currently, we do have a big storm system in the northwest. This has been going on for a few days, and it's only worsening over time. And we can see it is pulling down this trough. Jet stream looks to be going about like this. We have a bit of a trough in the east, a bit of a trough in the west, and then what we're seeing is warm air surging through the center of the nation here. So again, cold air heading into the west, cold air heading into the east, and then the central is bulging up here with this ridge of warm air. We'll focus in here first off on the northwest. We always kind of focus in here first off. And as you can see, Northern California here seeing some of this low pressure. We have just this line of low pressure, but we'd call this as a broad area of low pressure. There's probably just lower pressure in general in this area. And the main low, I think, is located somewhere in Northern California at this point. So this is going to be your lowest pressure. Everything else is basically a secondary low. But again, it is more broad low pressure than anything across this region. So that's why we're seeing storminess up and down this frontal boundary where there's a lot of lower pressure. As we can see for Northern California, Nevada, and parts of southern Oregon, as well as just the surrounding states, we see some showery activity happening all the way out east for a lot of those areas. Most of the storminess here is happening in this corridor where we do see some heavier showers moving into the San Francisco Bay, even areas north of there for the northern coasts of California there. And then we do see some snowfall happening here in these northern hilly regions for California and Oregon, and things are only cooling down. We can actually see the 500 millibar lines here. These black lines are moving down. That's indicating that colder air is moving in with this system. So we are seeing more of a trough developing as the minutes roll by. Cooler temperatures are rolling in, and we're seeing a lot of this rainfall switch to snowfall actually before our eyes. It's going to be quite a snowy day today for a lot of folks. We'll take a look at that on the model guidance in just a little bit. As we move up northward here, we can see that there is some similar conditions here across inland portions of Oregon and Washington, as well as Idaho and Montana here as well. But again, there is just showery activity happening for many folks around the western United States. As we move towards Texas and Oklahoma here, we can see a pocket of heavier precipitation in here. Definitely some heavier showers for Texas, where we do see the yellows and oranges, even reds popping up. Definitely some moderate to heavy precipitation taking place. Pretty widespread as well here for coastal Texas. Now, as we continue towards the eastern United States, we can see that there is a low up here for New England, and then a stretching cold front underneath here. So we can see this mini trough in here on the 500 millibar geopotential height. This is creating colder temperatures as of today for a lot of the eastern United States. Last night on Halloween night, we saw a lot of storminess here in Virginia, and we could see a lot of this left over around the cold front offshore, but there is plenty of storminess around, so this is a pretty high precipitation cold front. Again, some are pretty dry and some feature a lot of storminess. Usually it depends on how strong it is. We can see some showery activity still onshore for a lot of Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, New Jersey, and then all of New England as well. We're seeing these light to moderate showers, pretty sporadic, I would say pretty scattered within, but they are around, and probably the most widespread rain is happening here for Martha's Vineyard, Nantucket, and then even Cape Cod here in southern Massachusetts, where we can see a little bit more persistent storminess taking place in here. Some of those moderate showers passing by as well. Anyway, what we're going to go ahead and do is move on, and we're going to take a look at the upcoming storminess, and then we're going to break down the long-range temperature pattern. Now, here is the upcoming storminess as we just continue this on towards this evening. This is going to be right around the middle of the night here. Tonight, we can see a lot more snowfall happening for the Sierra Nevadas there. the Cascades a bit, and then especially there in the northern Rockies and kind of just the hilly inland regions of Oregon And Washington there, we're seeing quite a bit of that storminess as well. We can tell that there's just a lot of ridging happening for the central and eastern United States by this point as well. Some storminess left over for the eastern and the Gulf states here, but not quite as major, obviously, as this storminess happening out west here, where a lot of the activity is located. As time moves on here, we can see all of this by tomorrow afternoon has spread into mostly just the Rockies here. So we see states like the Four Corner states, Wyoming, Idaho, and Montana seeing a lot of that snowfall by this point with this low that has basically just done this here. It's also pulled down the trough, and here's where it is now. As we continue this on, we can see it spreads to here and then kind of breaks up. This does feature a bit of a cold front underneath, so a lot of storminess up and down here. Could feature some severe weather, especially here on the southern end. I've said this time and time again. This does show some of those features that you would expect with a severe weather event. We can see some snowfall beginning again for the Rockies, all the way up into the Canadian Rockies as well, as a low moves through British Columbia there. As we continue things on, by Monday the 7th, we see another strong low over the western United States, and now we're seeing plenty of snowfall and rainfall here in the western United States. So we're seeing just storminess in general out there as we continue things on. By Tuesday, it kind of moves up here and weakens, but is bringing a lot of snowfall here to south central Canada there. We see another storm system moving through into the western United States, bringing more and more snowfall here for the Northwest still by Wednesday the 9th. This is when the tides start to turn here. By Friday the 11th, we can see some storminess up here in the Northwest. But what we also see is a trough trying to move through into the eastern United States. And what's interesting is by the time we're reaching about Saturday the 12th, this model in particular tries to show a snowstorm nor'easter take place here for the Northeast. In particular, the interior Northeast. But really, we do reach pretty far south into southern New England here, which would be an interesting event. Not unheard of for mid-November, but definitely I wouldn't count on this. I would say it's much more likely that inland New England regions see a snowstorm around this time frame, obviously, than the coastal southern regions. Anything is possible, of course, but that just seems to be what's more likely this time of year. We can tell that this model completely flips to a positive P&A pattern. We see this warm bubble out west that is forcing these storms and the cold air to move around that area into the eastern United States again. And we have returned to this basically from the 10th and beyond of November. A lot of the storminess is also located over the eastern United States, so a full flip possible after the 10th and at least through the 15th of November here, which is kind of what we've alluded to for a while now on the channel, and I think it is a big possibility. I wouldn't say a likelihood yet, but definitely a possibility. We've seen it time and time again on the models, and we actually see some deep Arctic air pouring into the eastern United States by this point, with plenty of snowfall for the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes. And here, very, very interesting stuff. Clearly a positive P&A pattern taking over by this point on this model. Not that that is 100% going to be correct, but definitely a possibility at this point, which is more than I can say, the past week or so. Now, let's take a look at the GFS temperature pattern. This will get us pretty far into the pattern, but then we're going to break down the CFS model, which will get us all the way into December. So we can tell we are totally locked in a negative P&A pattern, and what this means is there's plenty of cold air out west. All the activity is also heading into this region. We saw that on the simulated radar just a minute ago, and how this works is, again, I've always said this, the warm and cold temperatures work like oil and water. They don't want to mix. They want to move around each other, just like oil and water. So we don't see warm air trying to head right where the cold air is, obviously. What we do see, I'm going to recreate this bubble, is we see the warm air moving around into the central and eastern United States. We see this occurring. This is a classic negative P&A pattern. So if you hear me say negative P&A, this is what I mean. As time rolls on, though, we see this continues for a very long while, all the way until about the 10th, and that's when a big switch happens here. What we see here is the very opposite. This is by Sunday the 13th. We see a warm bubble out west. Look at that. This is the opposite of a negative P&A. We call this a positive P&A, and it works the same way, but just the opposite. Again, the cold air can't either move into the warm air. We see it, again, work like water and oil. So this cold air is moving around the warm bubble from the north this time around into the eastern United States. So you can tell the PNA basically dictates the weather across the entire United States. And it makes sense because we always know that storms and air masses and everything are moving from west to east. Okay, so it all starts with the west. The east is just downstream from the west. We got to keep that in mind. So what happens out there is directly impacting what's happening in the east 9 times out of 10. Obviously, hurricanes and everything coming from the Atlantic Ocean would be a different story. But a lot of times, especially this time of year and heading into the winter, we see things heading downstream from the west to the east in general, right? As we continue things on, we see this pattern just kind of reinforce itself, okay? So it's continuing, and we see this positive PNA bubble just sticking around, but deep Arctic air rolling through into the central United States and likely going to be impacting this eastern region as well over time. According to this model, that is. I don't know for sure. Like I said, my confidence is probably medium, I would say, in this all occurring this way. This is the pretty long range. But this, the examples of what a positive and negative PNA are, that is certainly true. Let's take a look at our CFS model here. This one's going to get us a bit further. We are taking a look at 5-day increments, though. So this, for instance, is the November 2nd through 7th time frame. So tomorrow and beyond. And we see the negative PNA pattern here, forcing the warm air into the east. Not a big surprise here. As we continue things on, though, this is the 11th through the 16th. This model seems a bit confused. It has some colder air out west, and it has some trickling into the eastern United States. I want to see a clear indication. This model doesn't have a big flip until, I see some warmer air being potentially trended in here. For the 29th through the 4th, it certainly has colder air in the east as opposed to the west here. This is the one time I see this model really showing something in concrete here that looks like a positive PNA, and that just continues on all the way through mid-December. So the one thing to take away here, this model doesn't have us quickly switching over to a positive PNA pattern just like we saw on the previous model. But the one thing we can take away from this model in particular is that once it does flip to a positive PNA pattern, it keeps us in a positive PNA pattern all the way from mid-November to mid-December here. Again, take this with a grain of salt, just like the last one, because it still is the very, very long range. So confidence is not very high, but it is interesting to see the little details that could be more accurate than the actual, map we're seeing. If we look at the bigger picture, the more broad picture, we can get a lot more accurate information from these low confidence model runs. The one thing that I'm seeing in particular, like I just mentioned, is it keeps us in the positive PNA pattern. Once it flips, it keeps us there for about a month at least. So we can expect potentially a long positive PNA pattern once that pattern inevitably flips. It doesn't have to happen, but almost certainly it will happen at a certain point. And it is interesting to see that we are going to go back to a solid positive PNA pattern. You might remember that a lot of September and October went this way for about a month or more. So it's not going to be a surprise if that happens again. Everything as far as climate is concerned is very similar to how it was just, a month or two ago. So we can see very similar things happen again and again and again. It is a pattern after all. So interesting to see here. I hope you guys have learned some things. This has been a little bit more educational than I originally intended for, but this is kind of how I break down model runs. When things are lower confidence, that doesn't mean that everything needs to just be thrown away to the trash. There is things to take away always from this type of information. Whether the actual map that we're seeing here for December 11th through December 16th is perfectly accurate. I doubt that's perfectly accurate, right? But what could be accurate is the fact that this model thinks we will be in a long-term positive PNA pattern. That's a lot easier for a model to predict at this type of range. I hope it makes sense. If there's any further questions, I would love to make more videos like this. So leave comments down below with any questions or thoughts on all of this. And I would love to start talking more about that type of stuff. Be sure to subscribe, as we will be making daily uploads about this pattern. We will get to the bottom of it, and oftentimes we are some of the first to see when the pattern will flip. We're pretty on top of these things. So be sure to subscribe, check in daily, as we will get to the bottom of it. Like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below again with your thoughts on this whole type of topic, and I'll see you guys in the next video.